You are listening to the sound of rain tapping against a cold pane of glass, high above the frantic pulse of Manhattan. It is late, long past the hour when the city's electric lights usually blind the stars. But inside this small room on the 33rd floor of the Hotel New Yorker, the darkness feels absolute. The year is 1943, but time has lost its meaning here. The air is thick with the scent of old paper, ozone, and the faint, coppery tang of heating elements that have long since gone cold. If you listen closely, past the low rumble of the midnight traffic below, you can hear the soft, rhythmic rustle of wings, feathers brushing against cardboard, a gentle, fragile cooing that breaks the heavy silence. This is room 3327, and it is the entire world for a man who once held the future of human civilization in his scarred, trembling hands. You can see him sitting in the shadows, a silhouette so thin and fragile he seems almost translucent, like a ghost trapped between the pages of an unwritten journal. His tailored suit, once the height of Gilded Age sophistication, hangs loosely from his gaunt frame. His long, slender fingers, the very hands that tamed the invisible currents of the earth, are gently stroking the snowy white feathers of a pigeon resting on his knee. To the world outside that door, the politicians, the military minds, and the creditors who hawk at his heels, he is a relic of a bygone era, a mad scientist who outlived his own legend. They call him an eccentric, a broken dreamer living on charity, but they do not see what he sees. They do not understand that in the quiet sanctuary of this room, the darkness is not empty. It is alive with equations, glowing with the memory of a light that no one else had the courage to look at. You are witnessing the final, quiet rebellion of Nikola Tesla, the man who literally illuminated the modern world, who gave humanity the alternating current that powers the very grid humming beneath your feet right now, is spending his final days in a room he cannot afford, surrounded by secrets the world is desperate to steal. The tragedy is not just that he is poor, it is that he is profoundly, beautifully misunderstood. The public remembers the lightning creator, the showman who let hundreds of thousands of volts pass through his own body at world fairs to prove his currents were safe. They remember the bitter war with Thomas Edison, a battle fought in newspapers and boardrooms where cold commerce triumphed over pure genius. But here, in the dim glow of a single desk lamp, the rivalry matters less than the quiet truth of what he left behind. You begin to notice the trunks. They are heavy, bound in iron, and reinforced with canvas stacked against the wall like silent sentinels. Within those wooden chests lie thousands of pages of notes, sketches, and theoretical formulas that the United States government is quietly terrified of. Rumors have begun to drift through the corridors of Washington and the dark offices of the newly formed FBI. They whisper of a weapon so terrible it could end war forever or erase entire cities from the map with the push of a button. They call it a peace ray. The media calls it a death beam. For Tesla, it is simply the logical conclusion of a lifetime spent listening to the vibrations of the universe. He does not want destruction. He wants a shield so impenetrable that no nation would ever dare launch an attack again. He wants to force humanity into peace through the sheer majesty of science. Yet, as you watch him whisper to the white pigeon, you realize the immense contradiction at the heart of his existence. The mind that conceived of a wireless world, a global system of energy that would cost nothing and belong to everyone, is trapped in a cage of his own making. He is plagued by phobias that grow sharper with every passing year. The sight of pearls makes his skin crawl. He must wipe his dinner plates 27 times with separate linen napkins before he can bring himself to eat. He counts his steps, calculates the cubic volume of his food, and refuses to touch anyone's hair. To the casual observer, these are the hallmarks of madness, the unraveling of a once brilliant mind. But if you look deeper, through the lens of a psychologist, observing a master of abstraction, you see a man whose sensory perception was so violently acute, so intensely tuned to the frequencies of the world, that the everyday environment was an agonizing assault on his nervous system. You are looking at a man who could hear the ticking of a pocket watch 3 rooms away, who felt the vibration of a passing carriage as a physical blow to his chest. His eccentricities were not a descent into insanity. They were the defensive walls he built to protect a brain that operated on a higher voltage than the rest of humanity. And now, that voltage is fading. The hotel staff treats him with a mix of reverence and pity. They bring him warm milk and crackers, knowing he rarely eats the meals he orders. They look away when he carries bags of grain to the local parks, spending his last remaining coins to feed the flocks of pigeons that follow him like an invisible court. To Tesla, these birds are not pests. They are his truest companions, the only creatures in New York that do not want to buy his patents, steal his ideas, or demand payment for his debts. You can feel the tension building beyond the walls of room 3327. The world outside is engulfed in the flames of the Second World War. Tanks are rolling across Europe, battleships are sinking in the Pacific, and scientists in hidden laboratories are racing to split the atom. The stakes have never been higher, and everyone is looking for an edge. Agents from the Office of Alien Property are already drawing up the paperwork to seize everything in this room the moment his heart stops beating. They are waiting for the old man to die, watching the door from the shadows of the hallway, counting his breaths through the keyhole. They know that inside those iron-bound trunks lies a power that could alter the balance of global empire forever. But inside the room, the pace of the universe slows down. Tesla looks out the window, his eyes reflecting the distant, cold glow of the city skyline. He remembers when New York was dark, when the night belonged to the moon and the oil lamp. He remembers the thrill of the first dynamos turning, the sudden, breathtaking burst of white light that chased away the shadows of the 19th century. He gave that gift to the people down there, the millions of souls sleeping beneath the electric stars, completely unaware that the architect of their world is freezing in a rented room, unable to pay his radiator bill. There is a profound, poetic melancholy in this image, the master of light, fading into the dark. You realize, as the silence deepens, that this is not just a story about science or invention. It is a psychological study of isolation. It is an exploration of what happens when a human being climbs so high into the realm of pure thought that he can no longer find his way back to the warm, flawed world of human connection. He chose this path. He rejected love. He rejected wealth. He rejected comfort, all for the sake of a vision he believed was divinely inspired. He walked through life as a secular prophet, predicting smartphones, wireless internet, radar, and robotics decades before the technology even existed to build them. But prophets are rarely welcome in their own land, and they almost always die alone. The pigeon on his lap stirs, cooing softly as Tesla's hand grows still. For a moment, the world seems to hold its breath. The rain against the window slows to a gentle mist, and the hum of the city feels like a distant lullaby. You're there with him, witnessing the quietest hour of a loud life. The mysteries of room 3327 are not just hidden in the blueprints or the top-secret government files. They are written in the lines of his face, in the heavy silence of a man who gave everything away and kept nothing for himself. The story of how he arrived at this dark pinnacle, of the wounds that shaped his youth and the betrayals that broke his spirit, is waiting to unfold. But for now, the room remains calm, a safe harbor in the storm of history where the secrets can rest for just a little longer before the world comes to tear them apart. You are standing at the foothills of the Dinaric Alps, where the wind howls through the mountain passes with a fierce ancient wildness. The air here tastes of pine needles, wet stone, and the sharp metallic promise of an approaching thunderstorm. The year is 1856, and the village of Smiljan is nothing more than a cluster of modest stone houses nestled against the dark silhouette of the timberline. It is the absolute edge of the Austrian Empire, a rugged borderland where life is measured by the turning of the seasons, the harshness of the winter, and the unyielding rhythm of faith. Inside a small Serbian Orthodox parsonage, a young woman named Juka is in labor. Outside, the sky has turned an ominous, bruised shade of purple. Lightning fractures the midnight sky, casting long, violent shadows across the wooden crucifix on the wall, while thunder rattles the very foundations of the earth. You can hear the midwife trembling as the storm peaks. To the superstitious villagers of the Balkans, a child born during a tempest of this magnitude is marked by the devil, a creature of ill omen, destined to bring ruin or chaos. He will be a child of darkness, the midwife whispers, her hands shaking as she wraps the newborn in coarse linen. But Juka looks down at her son's unusually long, delicate fingers, her eyes reflecting the sudden flash of blue fire outside the window. "No," she replies softly, her voice steady against the roar of the heavens. "He will be a child of light." In that precise, cinematic instant, the cosmic alignment of Nikola Tesla's life is struck. He is baptized in fire and electricity, born into a world that will spend the next 87 years trying to comprehend the storm he carries within his mind. You begin to see that the boy's early world is defined by a heavy, psychological tension between two powerful forces. His father, Nikola Tesla, is a brilliant, stern Orthodox priest, a man whose eloquence in the pulpit is legendary. Milutin possesses an astonishing memory, able to recite entire volumes of poetry and scripture in multiple languages without missing a single cadence. He rules his household with the rigid discipline of a scholar and the spiritual weight of a cleric, desperate to mold his sons in his own image. From his father, Nikola inherits a deep, philosophical nature and an obsession with language and mental discipline. But it is from his illiterate mother, Juka, that the true spark of invention flows. She cannot read, yet she can construct complex mechanical tools, weaving looms and kitchen implements entirely from memory. She is a woman who can tie a knot in a bird's feather using only her fingers in the dark. Nikola will spend his entire life creditably declaring that his creative genius belonged entirely to her. Yet, you cannot understand the solitary man in room 3327 without understanding the profound trauma that shatters his childhood when he is only 5 years old. Nikola has an older brother named Dane, a boy of unparalleled intellect, a child prodigy whom the family views as the golden hope of the Tesla lineage. Dane is faster, stronger, and seemingly more brilliant than Nikola could ever hope to be. One crisp afternoon, Dane is riding a magnificent, spirited Arabian horse, a gift to the family from a grateful parishioner. The horse rears unexpectedly, or perhaps Dane loses his footing. The details remain blurred by the fog of family grief. The boy is thrown violently to the earth, his body broken. He dies within hours, under the horrified gaze of his parents. You are witnessing the moment Nikola's psychological landscape fractures forever. The grief that descends upon the parsonage is suffocating, absolute, and permanent. In the wake of the tragedy, every achievement Nikola manages is met with a devastating silence from his grieving parents. They look through him, their eyes tracking the phantom of the perfect son who was lost. The young Nikola comes to believe that his own existence is a disappointment, a second-rate substitute for the genius that died in the dirt. To survive within this emotional vacuum, he begins to withdraw inward, escaping the cold reality of his home into the limitless, malleable architecture of his own mind. You watch as this psychological retreat triggers a strange, terrifying neurological transformation. Around the age of 7, Nikola begins to experience vivid, uncontrollable hallucinations. Whenever a word is spoken or an object is named, a crystal-clear, three-dimensional image of it flashes before his eyes, so real that he cannot distinguish between the phantom in the air and the physical world. If someone mentions a fruit, the orange or apple appears suspended before his face, complete with its texture and subtle gleam, blocking his view of the room. It is an agonizing, overwhelming sensory overload that threatens to drive the young boy mad. To gain control over his own brain, Nikola begins a rigorous regimen of mental exercises. He discovers that if he travels in his mind to unknown worlds, he can escape these distressing apparitions. Every night, when the rest of the house is asleep, the boy lies in the dark and travels to imaginary cities, meeting people, studying landscapes, and building complex machinery in his thoughts. He refines this ability until his mind becomes a perfect, pristine laboratory. He does not need paper, he does not need wood models, he does not need a blacksmith. He can design a water wheel, set it spinning in his thoughts, and return to it 3 weeks later to check the bearings for wear and tear, calculating the precise friction entirely within his consciousness. This is not merely an intellectual gift, it is a profound neurological divergence, a form of synesthesia that allows him to perceive the forces of nature as physical, living entities. You notice that as he grows older, his relationship with the physical world becomes increasingly fragile, balanced on the edge of life and death. When he is 17, he completes his schooling and returns to Smiljan, only to find the village gripped by a horrific epidemic of cholera. The disease is merciless, turning the vibrant valley into a place of corpses and weeping. Nikola, his immune system already weakened by intense study, contracts the virus almost immediately. For 9 agonizing months, he lies in a small bed, unable to move, his body wasting away until his ribs threaten to pierce his skin. The local doctors give up hope, preparing his shroud. One afternoon, when the shadow of death feels heaviest in the room, Milutin rushes to his son's bedside, his proud posture broken by the prospect of losing his last remaining male heir. "You will get well," the priest promises. his voice cracking with a desperation he has never shown before. Nikola, barely able to open his sunken eyes, looks up at his father. He knows that Milutin has already planned his entire life, intending to send him to the seminary to become a priest, a fate Nikola dreads with every fiber of his being. He sees his opening, a desperate gamble for freedom played out on the edge of the grave. "I might get well," Nikola whispers, his voice fading, "if you will let me study engineering." The father, weeping openly, grabs his son's hand. "You shall go to the best technical institution in the world," Milutin declares. In that moment, the psychological weight lifts, the fever breaks, and within days, Nikola begins to miraculously pull himself back from the threshold of death. You follow him now to the Technical University in Graz, Austria, where the young Tesla arrives like a man possessed. He is fueled by a manic, desperate energy, determined to prove to his father's memory and his mother's pride that he is worthy of the life that was spared. He wakes at 3 in the morning and studies until 11 at night, 7 days a week. He memorizes entire textbooks, masters 9 languages, and passes his exams with scores so impossibly high that the dean of the university writes a letter to Milutin stating explicitly, "Your son is a star of the first rank, but his current pace will kill him." It is during a lecture on physics at Graz that the defining obsession of his life takes root. The professor, a strict traditional German academic named Poschel, is demonstrating a state-of-the-art Gamma dynamo, a machine that runs on direct current, creating massive violent sparks as its brushes rub against the commuter. The machine is inefficient, loud, and inherently flawed, losing vast amounts of energy to friction and heat. The young Tesla, watching the blue sparks fly, feels a sudden, intuitive revulsion. It is a visual offense to his sense of harmony. "Why must we use brushes?" Tesla asks, standing up in the crowded lecture hall. "Why can we not eliminate the commuter entirely and use an alternating current?" The professor stops the machine, a cold, condescending smile spreading across his face. He spends the next hour humiliating the young student before his peers, explaining with absolute mathematical certainty that an alternating current motor is a physical impossibility. It would require a machine to pull against itself, a scientific absurdity equivalent to perpetual motion. "Mr. Tesla may do great things," Professor Poschel announces to the snickering classroom, "but he will never build an alternating current motor. It is a law of physics." You can feel the cold fury that settles deep within Tesla's chest as he sits down, his face expressionless, but his mind burning. The authority figure, the institutional expert, has told him it cannot be done. For anyone else, this would be the end of a foolish dream. For Tesla, it is an existential challenge. He knows, with a certainty that defies logic, that the professor is wrong. He can feel the current in his blood. He can see it swirling in the air, like an invisible river waiting to be dammed. He will spend the next several years walking the streets of Europe, his mind a churning vortex of copper coils and rotating magnetic fields, searching for the key that will unlock the impossible. But the pressure of this internal search takes a devastating toll. He suffers a catastrophic nervous breakdown while working as a telegraph draftsman in Budapest. His sensory perception, always hyper-tuned, expands to a degree that is nothing short of torturous. He can hear the ticking of a watch in the next apartment. The rumble of a train 15 miles away causes the ground beneath his feet to shake with seismic violence. The light from a lamp is so blinding, it feels like a physical spear piercing his skull. He must place his bed on rubber cushions to isolate his body from the mysterious, invisible vibrations of the earth. He is dying of an illness that medicine has no name for, an overdose of awareness, a mind that has tuned itself to a frequency so high that the human body cannot sustain the voltage. And then, on a crisp afternoon in 1882, the miracle occurs. He is walking through a city park in Budapest with a close friend, reciting a passage from Goethe's Faust as the sun begins to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of crimson and gold. He looks at the setting sun, and something within his brain shifts. The long-sought solution does not arrive as a slow, methodical deduction. It hits him like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. You see him freeze in his tracks, his eyes wide, his walking stick suspended in midair. His friend panics, thinking he is having another stroke. But Tesla is looking at something invisible to the rest of the world. There, floating in the warm evening air between the trees, is a perfectly formed, glowing magnetic field, spinning with an effortless, celestial grace. The alternating current motor is not impossible. It requires two or more currents out of phase with one another to create a rotating vortex of magnetic force that can turn a rotor without ever touching it. No brushes, no friction, no loss of power. It is a flawless, frictionless dance of pure energy. With his stick, Tesla frantically draws the diagram in the dust of the park path, his hands shaking with an ecstasy that borders on religious revelation. He has solved the riddle that the greatest minds of Europe declared impossible. He has tamed the lightning. Now, he must find an empire wealthy enough, ambitious enough, and ruthless enough to build it. He turns his eyes toward the west, across the Atlantic, where a young, roaring nation is hungry for power. You are standing on the splintered wooden planks of a New York pier, the damp Atlantic fog clinging to your coat like a cold shroud. The year is 1884, and the city before you is a monstrous, roaring engine of ambition and coal smoke. It is an urban wilderness of mud-choked streets, horse manure, and tangled webs of black telegraph wires that blot out the sky like a canopy of dead spiders. Nikola Tesla steps off the immigrant steamship onto the soil of Manhattan with nothing but 4 cents in his pocket, a book of his own poems, and a letter of recommendation tucked into the breast pocket of his coat. He is 28 years old, his tall frame dangerously thin, his eyes burning with the quiet intensity of a man who has looked into the sun and survived. He has left behind everything he knew, gambling his entire existence on a single name that commands the modern world, Thomas Alva Edison. You can feel the raw, suffocating energy of the Edison Machine Works on Gurk Street when Tesla enters its gates. It is the industrial hellscape of spinning leather belts, clanking cast iron gears, and the constant, deafening roar of coal-fired boilers. Here, direct current electricity is being forged into a commercial empire, but it is a fragile empire. Edison's direct current is an inefficient, low-voltage system that can only travel a single mile before it loses its strength and dies in the copper wires. To illuminate New York, Edison must build a smoke-belching power station on almost every corner, choking the city with soot and filling the streets with an expensive, unmanageable labyrinth of thick cables. It is a clumsy, brute force approach to science, but it is making Edison a wealthy man and he will defend it with the ferocity of a warlord. You watch the first meeting between these two titans, an encounter that plays out like a psychological chess match between two opposing philosophies of human intellect. Thomas Edison is the quintessential American pragmatist. He is self-made, uneducated in the formal sense, blunt, and profoundly deaf in one ear. He works by exhaustive, grueling trial and error, testing thousands of materials until one happens to work. He is a master of the press, a salesman of genius, who understands the psychology of the investor perfectly. Tesla, on the other hand, is a patrician intellectual, a refined product of European academic rigor, who designs entire power grids in his head with mathematical precision before ever touching a wrench. Edison looks at Tesla's elegant manners and tailored coat with an immediate, deep-seated suspicion. To Edison, theory is the plaything of lazy dreamers. Only results matter. Yet, Edison cannot ignore the young immigrant's terrifying competence. One night, the pride of the Edison Company, the massive electrical dynamos aboard the luxury ocean liner SS Oregon, break down, plunging the ship into darkness and delaying its departure. The company is losing thousands of dollars by the hour, and Edison's best engineers are baffled by the failure. Tesla steps forward into the sweltering, oil-slicked hold of the ship. He works through the night, without a moment of rest, testing the armatures, rewinding the coils entirely by intuition, his long fingers moving through the grease with the grace of a surgeon. At dawn, as Edison walks down the pier, he encounters Tesla walking back to his boarding house, his face blackened with soot, his hands raw. "Our Prussian has been out all night," Edison mutters to a colleague, assuming the young man had abandoned the task. When Tesla informs him that the Oregon is repaired and already steaming out of the harbor, Edison walks away in stunned, silent disbelief. You see the precise moment the relationship fractures, setting the stage for a war that will define the rest of the century. Edison recognizes that his direct current dynamos are constantly burning out under the strain of New York's growing demand. He turns to Tesla, offering a challenge that reveals both his desperation and his low estimate of the immigrant's intelligence. "If you can completely redesign these dynamos and increase their efficiency," Edison says, a casual smirk on his face, "I will give you a bonus of $50,000. In 1884, $50,000 is a king's ransom, an astronomical fortune equivalent to millions today. It is enough to buy independence, to build the dream laboratories Tesla has carried in his mind since Budapest." Tesla takes the bait. For nearly a year, he lives in a state of manic, sleepless isolation. He works 20-hour days, redesigning 24 different types of dynamos, replacing Edison's clumsy mechanisms with elegant, high-efficiency automatic controls. He saves the Edison Company thousands of dollars in manufacturing costs and creates a system that is vastly superior to anything they have built before. When the task is complete, Tesla stands before Edison's desk, his posture straight, his eyes bright with the expectation of his reward. He asks for the $50,000. Edison looks up from his ledgers, puts his feet on the mahogany desk, and spits a stream of tobacco juice into a brass spittoon. He smiles, a cold mocking grin that cuts through Tesla's European naivety like a razor. "Tesla," Edison says, his voice dripping with condescension, You don't understand our American humor. Instead of the fortune, Edison offers him a $10 a week raise. You are watching a man's pride turn to stone. Tesla does not yell. He does not argue. He simply stands up, buttons his coat, and walks out of the Edison building, never to return. It is an act of supreme dignity, but the immediate consequences are brutal. The American economy is entering a sharp downturn, and an engineer who has burned his bridges with the legendary Thomas Edison is a pariah. For the next year, Tesla falls into the deepest, most humiliating valley of his life. The man who designed the future is forced to work as a common ditch digger, clearing the frozen earth of New York streets to lay the very cables for Edison's direct current system. Every strike of his shovel against the rocky soil is an agonizing reminder of his failure. He earns $2 a day, his brilliant mind trapped in the numb, aching body of a laborer, wondering if the professor in Graz was right after all, if he is destined to be nothing more than a forgotten madman who died in the mud. But fate has a different geometry in mind. The foreman of the ditch-digging crew notices that his tall, quiet laborer is not like the others. He listens as Tesla explains, over lunch boxes of cold bread, how the electricity running through the cables they are burying is a primitive mistake. The foreman introduces Tesla to A.K. Brown, an executive at the Western Union Telegraph Company, who possesses the vision to see past the mud on Tesla's clothes. Brown listens to Tesla's description of the rotating magnetic field, and he feels the ground shift beneath his feet. He realizes that if this young Serb is right, Thomas Edison's entire empire is a house of cards waiting to fall. In April 1887, with Brown's financial backing, the Tesla Electric Company is born in a small laboratory on Liberty Street, just blocks away from Edison's headquarters. It is here, in this quiet sanctuary, that Tesla unleashes the dammed-up, creative fury of the past 3 years. He builds his alternating current motors and generators exactly as he had seen them in his Budapest vision, without a single blueprint or mistake. Every machine works perfectly the moment the switch is thrown. He registers patent after patent, creating a complete, flawless, multi-phase system that can transmit millions of volts of electricity across hundreds of miles, with virtually no loss of power. The true turning point arrives when George Westinghouse, a brilliant, wealthy industrialist from Pittsburgh who made his fortune inventing the air brake for trains, enters the Liberty Street lab. Westinghouse is a man of massive scale, a visionary who wants to power the entire American continent. He walks into Tesla's laboratory and sees a small copper egg sitting on a wooden table. Tesla throws a switch, and an invisible, rotating magnetic field creates an electromagnetic vortex that causes the egg to stand on its end and spin with a high, beautiful hum, completely untouched by human hands. It is the egg of Columbus, a theatrical demonstration of a physical miracle. Westinghouse doesn't just see a trick, he sees the future of global industry. He buys Tesla's alternating current patents for $200,000 in cash, a massive block of stock, and a contract that promises Tesla a royalty of $2.50 for every horsepower of alternating current electricity sold. You are witnessing the birth of the War of the Currents, a corporate and psychological conflict of unprecedented savagery. Thomas Edison realizes that Westinghouse and Tesla are about to erase his life's work. He panics, launching a propaganda campaign designed to convince the American public that alternating current is a lethal, uncontrollable monster that will slaughter their children in their sleep. Edison pays local boys to kidnap stray dogs and cats from the streets of New Jersey, bringing them to his laboratory, where he publicly electrocutes them using Tesla's alternating current to show its danger. He assists in the secret development of the world's first electric chair, ensuring it is powered by a Westinghouse AC generator so that the public will forever associate Tesla's current with the stench of burning human flesh. The newspapers call it Westinghousing a condemned man, but Tesla responds not with words or mudslinging, but with the sublime poetry of science. At the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, Westinghouse wins the contract to illuminate the fairgrounds using Tesla's system, undercutting Edison's bid by $500,000. On opening night, President Grover Cleveland pushes a button, and in an instant, nearly 100,000 alternating current lamps burst into a blinding, magnificent white brilliance, turning the night into day. The White City looks like a celestial paradise dropped onto the shore of Lake Michigan. Millions of visitors walk through the fairgrounds in a state of religious awe, realizing that the dark ages of humanity are over. Tesla walks through the crowds clad in white tie and tails, letting 200,000 volts of high-frequency, alternating current pass through his own body, his fingertips glowing with a beautiful, harmless blue fire, his long hair standing on end like a halo of light. He has won. He has proven to the world that his current is not a killer, but a servant of humanity, as safe as a mother's touch and as powerful as the gods. The ascent is complete. The immigrant ditch digger has become the undisputed master of the world's energy, but at the very summit of his glory, the first dark cracks of his isolation begin to show. You are standing beneath the vaulted ceilings of the Delmonico's dining room, the air thick with the scent of roasted pheasant, expensive tobacco, and the crisp perfume of Gilded Age high society. The year is 1895, and Nikola Tesla is the most famous, enigmatic figure in the Western world. He moves through the crowd like a visitor from another century, a towering silhouette of absolute elegance. At 39, his dark hair is parted down the middle, his deep-set gray eyes glowing with an intense, hypnotic light. Around him gather the masters of the American Empire: John Jacob Astor, J. Pierpont Morgan, Stanford White, and Mark Twain. They compete for his attention, desperate to catch a glimpse of the man who has turned science into a form of high art. He is no longer an immigrant fighting for survival. He is a wizard in white tie and tails, a secular prophet who has conquered the night. Yet, you notice the invisible barrier he maintains between himself and the glittering world he inhabits. He sits at his designated table, which must always be covered by exactly 18 fresh linen napkins. He will not touch a woman's gloves, and the sight of a pearl necklace causes him to freeze with an internal, visceral disgust. When he shakes a hand, he immediately excuses himself to wash his own in salubrious isolation. He is surrounded by the most beautiful and wealthy women of New York, heiresses who would gladly throw their fortunes at his feet. Yet he treats them with a cold, courtly distance that defies their advances. He has chosen a life of absolute celibacy, convinced that the raw, creative energy of the human spirit must never be diverted from the grand architecture of his intellect. He is a monk of the laboratory, a man who has traded the warmth of human touch for the cold, eternal embrace of the cosmos. You watch him late at night, long after the lights of Delmonico's have dimmed, as he returns to his sanctuary, the massive laboratory at 35 South 5th Avenue. This is the inner chamber of his mind made physical. The room is dark, save for the eerie, beautiful phosphorescence of vacuum tubes that glow with a pale green light without being connected to any wires. Giant high-frequency transformers, the iconic Tesla coils, loom in the shadows like metallic trees. When he throws the heavy knife switches, the room erupts into a violent, deafening symphony of energy. Long, jagged fingers of artificial lightning, 30 feet long, snap and hiss through the air, striking the iron columns of the building with the sound of artillery fire. Tesla walks calm through this electric tempest, his hands in his pockets, completely immune to the lethal voltages dancing around his head. He has tuned the frequency of the current so perfectly to the resonance of his own body that the electricity glides over his skin like water, illuminating him from within until he stands before his assistants as a glowing phantom of pure white light. It is here that his grandest, most terrifying vision takes its final shape. He has already tamed Niagara Falls, building the first great hydroelectric power station that transmits millions of horsepower across hundreds of miles to light up the city of Buffalo. It is a triumph that should have satisfied any ordinary ambition. But for Tesla, the wires themselves are an insult, a primitive, clumsy cage that binds the true potential of the Earth. He begins to realize that the planet beneath his feet is not an inert mass of rock and soil. It is a magnificent, living conductor, a giant electrical reservoir teeming with natural frequencies. If he can strike the Earth with the right rhythmic pulse, he can set its entire electrical charge into a state of sympathetic resonance, turning the world into a single, global wireless network. He envisions a world where a farmer in Africa can stick a small rod into the soil and draw out free, limitless power to run his plow, while a ship at sea can receive news, music, and weather reports through the air from a single, central tower. But the price of reaching for the stars is that the Earth beneath you can slip away. On a freezing March morning in 1895, a fire breaks out in the basement of his laboratory building. Within hours, the entire structure is reduced to a smoldering mountain of ash and melted iron. In a single devastating stroke, Tesla loses everything: the blueprints for his machine gun oscillators, the secret notes on wireless transmission, the early models of his cold light tubes, and the historical records of his discoveries are wiped from existence. The financial loss is catastrophic, but the psychological blow is profound. His assistants weep in the streets, but Tesla walks away in absolute silence, his face an impenetrable mask of stone. He does not allow himself to mourn. He knows that the true laboratory is not made of brick and mortar. It resides within the unassailable fortress of his own consciousness. He simply closes his eyes, reconstructs every single blueprint from memory, and prepares to build a new empire from the ashes. You follow him now to the high, windswept plains of Colorado Springs, where he retreats in 1899 to conduct his ultimate experiments in wireless energy. Funded by $100,000 from his wealthy admirers, he constructs a bizarre, futuristic laboratory that looks like a wooden fortress dropped into the Wild West. From the center of the roof rises a magnificent 100-foot mast, topped with a giant copper sphere that pierces the mountain sky. Inside He builds the largest Tesla coil ever conceived by human hands. The magnifying transmitter, it is a monstrous machine, 50 feet in diameter, wound with miles of heavy copper cable that can create voltages that defy human measurement. You can feel the ground shake beneath your boots as Tesla prepares for his definitive demonstration. He stands at the control console, his long fingers resting on the heavy copper lever. His assistant, Coleman Cito, watches him with a mixture of terror and awe. Tesla nods. The switch is thrown. The roar that follows is a sound New York never heard, a deep, seismic groan that rattles the teeth of the Rocky Mountains. The massive coil begins to hum with a high, screaming pitch that sounds like 1,000 sirens. Suddenly, a blinding, terrifying column of blue fire erupts from the copper sphere on the roof, leaping into the night sky like a spear thrown at the gods. The artificial lightning strikes the air with a crash that can be heard 15 miles away, shattering windows in the distant town. The grass for miles around the laboratory glows with a pale, ghostly St. Elmo's fire, and horses in nearby stables panic as blue sparks leap from their metal shoes. Tesla has done the impossible. He has pumped so much energy into the earth that he has created a stationary wave of electricity that travels through the core of the planet, bouncing off the opposite side of the globe and returning to his laboratory with increased strength. To prove his success to the skeptics, he drives 200 incandescent lamps into the dry prairie soil 20 miles away from the laboratory. Without a single wire or battery connecting them, he throws the switch, and 20 miles away, the barren desert bursts into a magnificent field of white light, powered entirely through the ground by the invisible pulse of his transmitter. He has turned the earth into a tuning fork of energy. Yet, as you watch him celebrate this lonely victory beneath the star-blackened sky of Colorado, you see the dark psychological shadow that will ultimately consume him. One late night, while listening to his highly sensitive wireless receivers tracking distant planetary storms, he hears something else. It is not the chaotic, white noise static of nature. It is a rhythmic, repeating signal. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is a mechanical, deliberate pulse coming from the deep void of space. Tesla freezes, his heart pounding against his ribs. In his isolation, he becomes convinced that he has just intercepted the first wireless communication from an alien civilization on Mars. He announces his discovery to the world's press, his voice trembling with a profound, cosmic wonder. But the world does not respond with awe. It responds with a cruel, devastating laughter. The newspapers that once hailed him as a demigod now write lampoons about the mad scientist who talks to Martians. His scientific peers distance themselves, whispering that the great Tesla has finally lost his mind to the high altitude and the loneliness. They do not see that he was likely intercepting the primitive early radio signals of his bitter rival, Guglielmo Marconi, who was conducting transatlantic experiments at the exact same frequency. Tesla's mind was so far ahead of his time that he misread the signal as celestial rather than terrestrial, and that single romantic miscalculation will cost him his reputation. He returns to New York, his funds depleted, but his ambition burning with a manic, desperate intensity. He approaches J. Pierpont Morgan, the cold, ruthless king of Wall Street, who holds the financial strings of the American continent in his manicured hands. Tesla paints a picture of a grand, wireless empire, the Wardenclyffe Tower project on Long Island. He promises Morgan a system that will dominate global communications, sending stock market quotes, news, and military secrets across the oceans in an instant. Morgan, seeing a massive commercial monopoly, invests $150,000. But Tesla has misled his investor. He doesn't just want to send messages. He wants to send power. He secretly redesigns the Wardenclyffe Tower to be a massive, wireless energy transmitter that will provide free electricity to the entire world. He builds a colossal 18-story tower of heavy timber, topped with a giant steel dome that looks like a metallic mushroom rising over the cliffs of Long Island. Beneath the tower, he digs a vertical shaft 120 feet deep, planting 12 massive iron pipes into the bedrock to grip the earth and set its molten core into vibration. You are watching a man play a dangerous game of deception with the most powerful financier on Earth. As the construction drags on, the funds run dry, and Marconi achieves his famous transatlantic radio transmission using a simple, cheap system of wires that costs a fraction of Tesla's Grand Tower. Morgan realizes that Tesla has lied to him, that he is building a system designed to give energy away for free, a system where Morgan cannot install an electric meter to collect his profits. Morgan pulls the plug, withdrawing his funding and blacklisting Tesla from every banking house in New York. You see him standing at the base of the unfinished Wardenclyffe Tower, the wind from the Atlantic tearing at his long black coat. The workers have walked off the site, the creditors are circling his hotels, and the grand dome is left to rust in the salt air. The pinnacle of his isolation is complete. He has built a machine that could have freed humanity from the tyranny of coal and oil. But he built it in a world that only values what it can sell. He stands alone on the cliff, a betrayed titan who has given everything to the future, only to find himself stranded in a present that has no place for his genius. You are walking through the long, echoing corridors of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, where the thick Persian rugs muffle the sound of your footsteps like fallen snow. The year is 1915, and the golden veneer of the Gilded Age is beginning to crack and peel away. Outside these limestone walls, the world is tearing itself to pieces in the mud of the European trenches, and the clean, romantic promise of the 19th century is dying a violent death. Inside, Nikola Tesla is a man under siege. He has lived in this luxurious hotel for nearly 2 decades, treating its grand suites as his personal manor. But the illusion of his empire is fading. The multi-million-dollar royalties from his alternating current patents have long since expired, swallowed up by his gargantuan, failed experiments at Wardenclyffe. He is 60 years old, his hair now streaked with silver, his impeccable suits showing the faint, tragic signs of wear at the cuffs and lapels. You can feel the heavy, suffocating weight of his debts pressing into the room. The hotel management, once honored by his very presence, now slips cold, demanding letters beneath his door. They want their money. The banks want their interest. The brilliant inventor, who once dictated terms to J. Pierpont Morgan, is now forced to slip out of the side entrances of the hotel at dawn to avoid the gaze of the desk clerks. To the public, he still maintains the proud, unyielding posture of a patrician nobleman. He still walks with a cane, still wears his lavender gloves, and still speaks to the press with the lofty authority of a cosmic prophet. But when the laboratory door closes and the cameras are gone, his hands begin to shake. The empire of light he built has fractured, leaving him stranded in a world that has grown cold, clinical, and commercial. You are witnessing the deep, psychological trauma of a man who has outlived his own era. His rivals, men who possessed only a fraction of his genius, but 100 times his financial cunning, are now carving up the modern world. Like spoils of war, Guglielmo Marconi is an international celebrity. His wireless telegraphy company, worth millions, using the very patents Tesla designed to build a global communications monopoly. Thomas Edison is a wealthy folk hero, celebrated as the father of American industry. His direct current system safely absorbed into the massive conglomerate of General Electric. Tesla looks out at the New York skyline, a skyline powered entirely by his own alternating current, and realizes that his name is being systematically erased from the textbooks. He has become an inconvenient ghost, an eccentric relic whose dreams of free, global energy are a direct threat to the coal barons and oil lords who dictate the wealth of nations. Then, a sudden bizarre rumor electrifies the air of Manhattan. In November 1915, newspapers across the globe announce that Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison have been jointly selected to receive the Nobel Prize in Physics. For a fleeting moment, the world seems to hold its breath. The press rushes to room 3327, eager to see the two legendary combatants of the current wars share the highest honor in human science. Tesla sits at his desk, his eyes reflecting a complicated mix of pride and ancient, burning resentment, to share a stage with Edison, the man who had humiliated him as an immigrant ditch digger, the man who had publicly electrocuted animals to destroy his reputation, feels like an insult to the purity of his intellect. Tesla drops a hint to his closest friends that he will reject the prize if it is offered as a joint award. He believes science is a sacred pursuit of truth, not a commercial compromise. But the true tragedy is far more cold and calculating. The Nobel Committee, realizing the impossible personal animosity between the two men and fearing a public scandal on the international stage, quietly changes its mind. The prize is awarded to Sir William Henry Bragg and his son for their work with X-rays. The $50,000 in prize money, a sum that would have completely cleared Tesla's debts and rebuilt his ruined laboratories, vanishes like a mirage in the desert. The press turns away, whispering that the old Serb has grown too proud, too difficult, too unstable to be trusted with the accolades of civilized society. You watch as the isolation turns inward, warping his magnificent mind into a maze of obsessive-compulsive rituals and profound phobias. The numbers dictate his entire existence now. He cannot stay in a hotel room unless its number is divisible by 3. He must walk around a block 3 times before entering a building. Every morning, he requires 36 fresh towels to be delivered to his room, using them to scrub every surface until his skin is red and raw. His diet shrinks to a Spartan, monochromatic menu: warm milk, a few crackers, and a bowl of boiled vegetables, all calculated to the exact cubic centimeter before he allows a single morsel to pass his lips. His assistants notice that he has developed an absolute, terrifying aversion to the sight of a fly landing on his desk. If an insect enters the room, he will immediately stop his work and lock himself in the dark for hours. Yet, the true sanctuary of his heart is no longer found in the laboratory or the dining rooms of the elite. It is found in the dirty, wind-blasted stone arches of the New York public libraries and the gray paths of Bryant Park. You can see him every afternoon, his tall, thin frame wrapped in a threadbare overcoat, carrying a small canvas bag filled with grain. He walks through the clouds of exhaust smoke and the roar of the city's new Ford motor cars, heading toward the flocks of pigeons that wait for him like a loyal, silent army. To these birds, he is not a forgotten genius or a bankrupt debtor. He is a god of abundance. They land on his shoulders. They blanket his long arms. They feed from his palms with a gentle, trusting rhythm that he can no longer find in any human being. Among them, there is one bird that changes everything. It is a beautiful, snowy white pigeon with faint gray tips on its wings. Tesla notices her one afternoon, her eyes remarkably bright and intelligent, watching him with a strange, deep-seated recognition. For the next several years, this white pigeon becomes the emotional center of his universe. She follows him across the city, flying to his hotel window on the 33rd floor, waiting patiently on the stone ledge until he opens the glass to let her in. He spends his nights whispering his grandest secrets to her, explaining equations that the Royal Society could not comprehend, his long fingers gently preening her feathers. You are listening to Tesla as he describes this relationship to his few remaining friends, his voice trembling with an intensity that borders on the mystical. "I loved that pigeon," he confesses, his eyes wide and unblinking in the dim light of his room. "I loved her as a man loves a woman, and she loved me. As long as I had her, there was a purpose to my life." It is a psychological revelation that is both beautiful and deeply heartbreaking. The mind that could map the electromagnetic fields of the earth, the heart that rejected the love of the wealthiest heiresses in America, has found its ultimate unconditional connection in the fragile chest of a street bird. It is the final, absolute retreat from a human world that had used his genius and discarded his soul. Then, on a freezing midnight in 1922, the final pillar of his emotional empire collapses. Tesla is sitting in his room when he hears a soft, frantic tapping against the window pane. He rushes to open it, and the white pigeon flutters inside, her movements heavy and uncoordinated. She drops onto his desk, her brilliant eyes clouded, her feathers ruffled and damp. Tesla kneels beside her, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He examines her with his long, trembling fingers, realizing with a sudden, devastating clarity that she is dying. You are witnessing a moment of profound, cosmic despair. Tesla looks into the eyes of the dying bird, and as he does, a blinding, terrifying phenomenon occurs within his mind. Two powerful beams of white light shoot from the pigeon's eyes, a light so intense, so dazzling, that it rivals the brilliant columns of artificial lightning he had created in his Colorado laboratory. It is a light more radiant than anything he had ever seen with his physical eyes. In that instant, as the light fades and the bird's body grows cold in his hands, something deep within Tesla's psychological architecture snaps forever. He realizes that the light was the departure of her spirit, and with her, the final spark of his own creative fire has gone out. He realizes that his work on Earth is done, and that the long, dark winter of his existence has finally begun. He is forced to leave the Waldorf Astoria shortly after, his luggage seized by the bailiffs to pay for his thousands of dollars in unpaid bills. He moves from one cheap boarding house to another, a transient phantom wandering through the margins of the city he built. He carries his iron-bound trunks with him, those heavy canvas chests filled with the blueprints of weapons that could shatter the world. He knows the government is watching him now. He can see the men in dark suits standing beneath the street lamps outside his window, waiting for the end. But he no longer cares about their wars or their empires. He sits in the dark of his new room, his ears filled with the distant, mocking hum of the alternating current power grid, waiting for the night to finally claim the master of the light. You are observing the long, pale fingers of dawn creep across the threadbare carpet of room 3327, illuminating a world constructed entirely out of memories and dust. The calendar on the wall says 1937, but inside this small space, decades bleed into one another without distinction. Nikola Tesla is 81 years old, a solitary monument to an era the world has long since forgotten. His skin has the quality of old parchment, tightly drawn over a sharp, aristocratic skull. But his eyes, those deep, burning pools of gray, still flash with the unpredictable energy of a high-voltage coil. He is a man who walks among ghosts, a living legend whose contributions to human progress are taken for granted every time a light switch is thrown, yet whose name has been reduced to a whisper in the dark corners of the city he helped build. You can hear the sharp, rhythmic rap of his cane against the sidewalk as he undertakes his final, desperate crusade against oblivion. Every year on his birthday, July 10th, Tesla flings open the door of his hotel suite and invites the press of New York to a grand, bizarre press conference. The young journalists arrive with a mix of cynical amusement and hidden reverence, looking for a sensational headline from the aging wizard. They gather around his desk, their notebooks poised, as Tesla, clad in a beautifully preserved 30-year-old frock coat, unveils visions that sound like science fiction to a world on the brink of another global catastrophe. You watch him lean forward, his voice a low, melodic purr that commands the room despite his physical frailty. He does not speak of the alternating current motor or the radio patents that were stolen from him. He speaks of the future. He announces the development of a teleforce weapon, a system that can project microscopic particles of liquid tungsten along a concentrated beam through the open air. He claims this beam can generate enough electrical energy to melt the engines of 10,000 enemy aircraft at a distance of 200 miles, creating an invisible, impassable wall around any nation that possesses it. My invention, he tells the scratching pens of the reporters, will bring an end to all war. It is not a death ray. It is a peace ray, a shield that will make aggression impossible. But behind the spectacular headlines of the next morning's papers, a much darker psychological drama is unfolding in the shadows of Washington and Berlin. The world is no longer laughing at the old man's predictions. The year is 1939, and the Nazi war machine is rolling across Europe. The threat of a weapon that can dominate the skies is no longer an eccentric's dream. It is a matter of absolute national survival. Agents from the Soviet Union, operating through a front company called Amtorg, quietly approached Tesla in his room, offering him a check for $25,000 in exchange for the preliminary blueprints of his particle beam weapon. Tesla, desperate for funds to feed his pigeons and pay his mounting hotel debts, takes the money. He sends them a packet of drawings, but the core secrets the mathematical equations that bridge the gap between theory and reality remain locked safely within the unassailable vault of his own mind. You begin to notice that he is no longer alone in the corridors of the Hotel New Yorker. Strange, quiet men in dark fedoras and heavy woolen coats have taken up permanent residence in the lobby and the rooms down the hall. They are agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, acting under the direct, paranoid orders of J. Edgar Hoover. They track Tesla's every movement, intercept his mail, and monitor his interactions with foreign diplomats. They are terrified that the aging genius, broken by poverty and bitter over America's neglect, might sell his ultimate discoveries to the highest bidder or slip out of the country to a hostile nation. Tesla knows they are there. He watches them through the keyhole of his door, a soft, mocking smile playing across his lips. He has spent a lifetime manipulating invisible forces. A few clumsy government spies are nothing more than an amusing distraction in his final hours. Yet, as the global storm intensifies, Tesla's internal world continues to fracture along ancient, traumatic fault lines. His obsession with order and cleanliness reaches its terrifying zenith. He refuses to look at a typewriter or touch a telephone unless he has thoroughly sterilized his hands with pure grain alcohol. He claims that his ears have become so sensitive that he can hear the footsteps of a mouse in the basement 33 floors below, and the vibration of the hotel elevators feels to his nerves like the grinding plates of a tectonic fault line. He is a prisoner of his own brilliant, overstimulated biology, a mind that cannot turn off its receivers, constantly bombarded by the electromagnetic pollution of a modern world that ran on his own ideas. And yet, in the middle of this sensory torture, his capacity for profound, heartbreaking empathy remains untouched. One night, during a fierce winter blizzard that blankets Manhattan in ice, a young, injured pigeon crawls onto his window ledge, its wing broken by the freezing gale. Tesla, despite his extreme germophobia, opens the window and takes the filthy, shivering bird into his hands. He spends his last remaining coins to hire a specialized mechanic to build a tiny, custom brass harness that supports the pigeon's broken wing, allowing it to rest without putting pressure on its bones. For months, the master of global power grids lives in a room filled with cardboard boxes, tending to the injured street birds of New York with the gentle, obsessive care of a mother. He has abandoned humanity, but he cannot abandon the fragile, suffering creatures that share his isolation. You watch him walk out into the New York traffic one evening in late 1937, a frail silhouette lost in the blinding glare of the city's neon lights. He is on his way to feed the pigeons at the library, his mind preoccupied with a complex equation regarding cosmic rays. He steps off the curb, entirely unaware of the heavy yellow taxicab hurtling down the wet asphalt toward him. The impact is sudden, a brutal crunch of bone against metal that throws his long, thin body into the gutter. He refuses to see a doctor, crawling back to the Hotel New Yorker on his hands and knees, his pride forbidding him from showing weakness to a world that had already pitied him too much. He survives the accident, but his body never truly recovers. The fractures in his ribs heal poorly, and he spends his final years confined to his bed in room 3327, his world shrinking from the vast expanses of the universe to the four walls of a rented room. In his final months, the mythic status of Nikola Tesla begins to crystallize even as his physical form disappears. Rumors fly through the scientific community that he has successfully developed a method to photograph thoughts, projecting the images of the human brain onto a screen using a highly specialized vacuum tube. Biographers and historians knock on his door, begging for interviews, realizing that the last living link to the heroic age of discovery is fading before their eyes. But Tesla turns them all away. He has no interest in their history books. He knows that the future will eventually vindicate him, that the world will one day have to return to the wireless truths he uncovered at Wardenclyffe if it wishes to survive its own greed. You can feel the heavy, expectant silence that settles over room 3327 as the year 1942 draws to a close. The war is at its bloody apex, and the secrets inside Tesla's iron trunks have become the most valuable, dangerous property on the planet. The old man lies in his bed, his breathing shallow and rattling, his long fingers resting on the old yellowed pages of his childhood journals. He has outlived Edison, he has outlived Westinghouse, he has outlived Marconi, he has won the war of endurance. But the price of his victory is an absolute, echoing silence. The stage is set for the final, quiet curtain to fall on the man who invented tomorrow, and the shadows are closing in to claim what remains of his brilliant, tortured empire. You are resting in the deepest, most sacred stillness of a cold January night in 1943. The frantic, screaming gears of the world outside have faded into a distant, harmless murmur. Inside room 3327, the long battle is finally over. Nikola Tesla lies beneath a simple white sheet, his sharp, aristocratic profile turned toward the frozen window pane. His breathing has grown slow, light, and perfectly rhythmic. No longer a struggle for life, but a gentle, deliberate winding down of a magnificent clockwork engine that has run for 86 years on the highest voltage the human spirit could endure. The single desk lamp casts a warm, amber glow across the iron-bound trunks, softening the sharp edges of a room that has served as a laboratory, a fortress, and a sanctuary. You can see that he has placed a small "Do Not Disturb" sign on the outside of his doorknob, a final, elegant gesture of privacy from a man who always knew exactly when his presence was required and when it was time to withdraw. The hotel maid, Alice Monaghan, will respect that sign for 3 full days, allowing the master of light to rest in an uninterrupted, majestic peace before the world realizes he has slipped away. In this quiet interval, time does not exist. The equations that once tormented his waking hours have settled into a beautiful, perfect symmetry. The blue lightning sparks that once danced at his fingertips have returned to the sky, dissolving back into the invisible, eternal ether from which he first pulled them. You notice that the heavy, suffocating phobias that plagued his later years have vanished, melted away by the approaching warmth of the infinite. He is no longer counting the napkins. He is no longer calculating the volume of his food. He is no longer terrified of the dirt or the noise of human touch. In the quiet theater of his fading consciousness, he is walking back through the geography of his youth. He is standing once again on the windswept hills of Smiljan, the smell of wet pine needles and ozone filling his lungs. He sees his mother, Juka, her long, delicate fingers moving with an impossible grace as she weaves a tapestry of light in the dark. He sees his brother, Dane, riding a magnificent horse through the mountain mist, no longer broken, but whole, smiling and waiting for him at the edge of the woods, You are witnessing the ultimate, beautiful release of a secular prophet. The world down there, the millions of people sleeping beneath the warm, electric stars of New York, Chicago, and London, will wake up tomorrow and push buttons, turn switches, and ride electric trains, completely unaware that the architect of their reality has just crossed the final threshold. He left them an entire civilization powered by his mind, and he took nothing with him but his dignity. He died with less than $100 in his account, yet he passed away as the wealthiest man to ever walk the earth, having spent his entire existence trading in the eternal currency of truth, wonder, and cosmic discovery. Suddenly, a soft, familiar sound echoes from the stone ledge outside the window. A gentle rustle of wings, a low rhythmic cooing that breaks the heavy silence of the room. You can see the dark silhouettes of dozens of pigeons gathering on the cold sill, their intelligent eyes looking through the glass at the quiet figure in the bed. They have come from Bryant Park, from the grand arches of the public library, from the lonely dark alleys of Manhattan. They have come to keep watch over their fallen king, their soft voices forming a beautiful, cinematic lullaby that carries his spirit out into the winter night. As the morning light begins to break over the Atlantic, painting the New York skyline in pale hues of gold and lavender, the heavy iron door of room 3327 is finally opened. Within hours, the room will be flooded with agents from the Office of Alien Property, FBI locksmiths, and military specialists, frantically drilling into his iron trunks, searching for the blueprints of the peace ray that could alter the fate of nations. They will carry away his papers, they will classify his notes, and they will spend decades trying to decipher the secrets of the man who tamed the universe. But they will be looking in the wrong place. The true genius of Nikola Tesla cannot be locked in a government safe or written on a top-secret blueprint. It is alive in the very air you breathe, in the invisible frequencies humming through the room around you, and in the profound, comforting darkness that is now guiding you into a deep, restful sleep. The Master of Light has finally turned out his lamp. The current has settled. The storm has passed. You are safe. You are warm. And you can let go now, drifting gently into the quiet, eternal slumber where all the secrets of the universe are finally understood.